It's the best second thought video yet. Okay, I'll watch it. Here, it's about Cuba and Venezuela, I guess.
This episode and others like it are made possible by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support my channel...
And Cuba already does not have freedom of speech and suppresses freedom of information regularly, but now they are also blocking off access to the internet so that information doesn't come out of the island.
And get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought.
The first important thing you can do is to be sure you know what communism really is.
What do you have to say to those saying this is a protest against communism specifically? Yeah, those people are charlatans, okay? People who are looking at this and saying, oh, dude, this is 100% a protest against communism. Like, this is a protest against, like, you know, the violent oppression of Cuba. Like, okay, dude, yeah, sure.
In other words, know your enemy. Whoever you are, wherever you are. Discuss the red menace with your neighbors, your friends, your business associates, your fellow students. Are you a factory worker? A member of a union, a trade association, a service club, or a church? Be alert to spot anyone promoting the communist line. And be doubly alert when the communists start hunting you. That's right. No matter who you are, you have your own circle of influence. So the commies want you. They have a variety of approaches. Any one of them may sound reasonable, even commendable. Just don't ever agree to join any committee, or support any cause, or sign any petition, or allow your name to be used in any manner until you know the whole story, who's behind it, what their real objectives are.
I feel that the millions of Americans who have long voted the Democrat ticket are just as loyal, they love America just as much, they hate communism just as much as the average Republican, which proves my contention, and that is that in this fight against communism, it isn't a Democrat fight, it isn't a Republican fight. It's so easy, you see, to talk about communism generally, to talk about the sellout in China and Korea generally. But unless you call the roll of the traitors, treason isn't like little topsy, it doesn't just grow. It's created by men with faces and men with names. And I think those of us who have been elected by the American people to man the watchtowers, unless we have the intelligence to recognize the traitors, and then, if I may use a word which we use in Wisconsin, unless we have the guts to name them, we should be taken down from those watchtowers and should not be representing the American people. And I don't intend to ever avoid giving the names of traitors, giving the names of communists, when I discover them in important position.
In last week's video, I mentioned polling that indicated only half of American young people hold a positive opinion of capitalism. It shouldn't be surprising to anyone that we're beginning to see a predictive...
That's crazy. That's such a weird thing that I guess it's because young people are just delusional. Or maybe because, and I see this with people in my age group, whether they're younger than me or even a little bit older than me, like they recognize that this economic organization is led them to, they've really dealt them a really shitty fucking hand. Okay, no, it's not because of HasanAbi. I have no fucking influence in the broader scheme of things. The reason why young people are extremely critical, no matter what, they are extremely critical of capitalism, for the most part, is because they recognize that it's not great for most of them. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean this is not the same for all young people. If you're like, you know, a high-paid banker, I guess you're gonna have a different point of view on capitalism. But for the most part, a lot of people have a tremendous amount of debt. They have very little job prospects. They see how America used to be for their parents who were upper middle class or middle class, where they had better opportunities overall. They could purchase a fucking house. They weren't living under the crushing, crippling debt of having to educate themselves at an insanely unreasonable price. So... And then they also live with the fear that if they get healthcare coverage, which is afforded to everyone unconditionally in most other parts of the world, they will add on an additional mountain worth of debt.
Predictably paranoid response from the reactionary crowd. If you thought McCarthyism was a thing of the past, well, no such luck. In this episode, we're going to talk about a budding effort to enforce so-called patriotic education standards in American schools, and what that means for the nation and the world going forward. Okay, let's set the stage. This past month, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis held a bill signing event where he and some others explained what exactly their program entails. I'm going to play a few clips to give you a sense of what we're dealing with, and then we'll talk about some specifics.
The bill also expands our previous efforts in civics to add a requirement for the high school government class that students receive instruction on the evils of communism and totalitarian ideologies. We have a number of people in Florida, particularly southern Florida, who've escaped totalitarian regimes, who've escaped communist dictatorships to be able to come to America. We want all students to understand the difference. Why would somebody flee across shark-infested waters, say leaving from Cuba to come to southern Florida? Why would somebody leave a place like Vietnam? Why would people leave these countries?
Yeah, it's the communism that made people leave Vietnam. Incredible take, dude. That's a good take, dude. Yeah, no, certainly. It certainly wasn't, I don't know, an invading military power immediately after an imperialist regime was ousted. An invading a dominant imperial power, such as the United States military, invading Vietnam because they were fearful that, you know, there could be some Chinese communist ideologies that were developing that could have been a threat. And, of course, all the southern Vietnamese, like political refugees, were shipped out to the United States in a similar capacity to Cuba.
And risk their life to be able to come here. It's important that students understand that.
Okay, lots to unpack here. House Bill 5, which is one of 3 related bills, includes a requirement that high school students be taught about, quote, the evils of communism and totalitarian ideologies. DeSantis then mentions Cuba and Vietnam. Let's start with Cuba. Cuba is an island nation which has suffered under brutal U.S. sanctions.
You are incorrect here. My father-in-law 100% left because communism in Vietnam. Yeah, I know, dude. Vietnamese Americans sometimes are very fucking reactionary. I know. You are incorrect here. You do not have first-hand experience with the South Vietnamese. No, totally, dude. The South Vietnamese ran away because they were afraid of communism. Got it.
For nearly 60 years now. These sanctions have been denounced.
I know. I just mentioned that. I said Vietnamese people escaped not because of communism, but because they were fucking America supporters in South Vietnam and capitalists. It has nothing to do with, first of all, there is no fucking communism in Vietnam. I'm sorry to all the lefties who say that. The people that left Vietnam, in a lot of instances, are quite similar to the people that left Cuba. Vietnamese, people living in Vietnamese diaspora in the United States have a lot of reactionary points of view for that reason.
By the UN as illegal and inhumane. And every...
However, I was very surprised to find out how much Vietnam loves America in general. Like, contemporary Vietnam and the Vietnamese fucking love the United States of America. They are the #1 supporters of America, more than Israel even.
Single member state, with the exception of the US and Israel, continues to vote against the oppressive measures which have cost the Cuban economy trillions of dollars. Despite this cruelty, Cuba is a country with a greater life expectancy than the US. They had a better COVID response than the US, and the basic human decency to send their doctors around the world to places that needed help, without any expectation of financial gain. Why would somebody flee across shark-infested waters to come to America? I don't know, Ron. Maybe it's because decades of illegal US embargoes are slowly strangling an innocent nation. A nation which deserves, like any other, the freedom to determine their own future. The United States will not allow that. It's no surprise that some Cubans have emigrated to the nearest country. What about Vietnam? Honestly, I'm not sure what DeSantis is talking about here. He makes it sound like there's some massive exodus from Vietnam to the US. That is not the case. The Vietnamese show overwhelming support for their government, which isn't surprising considering how effectively that government handles crises like COVID and actually takes care of their citizens. In fact, out of 45 polled nations, Vietnam reported the highest rate of satisfaction with their government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Going back to Cuba, as more free market policies have been implemented over the years, Cuban satisfaction with their government has declined, dropping from 81% under Fidel Castro to 54% today. The US Congress, by contrast, enjoys an abysmal 26% approval rating. That is among the worst in the world.
I don't understand it. Like, if Cuba is so fucking brutal and so awful because of communism, then why don't we just like lift the embargoes? You know what I mean? Like, I legitimately do not understand why we have to keep like these crippling sanctions on Cuba. Like, why? What's the problem? Just like let them exist then, and they'll fall apart regardless. You know what I mean?
Rate of satisfaction with their government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Going back to Cuba, as more free market policies have been implemented over the years, Cuban satisfaction with their government has declined, dropping from 81% under Fidel Castro to 54% today. The US Congress, by contrast, enjoys an abysmal 26% approval rating. That is among the worst in the world. And frankly, it's not surprising. Both Democrats and Republicans have shown time and again that they don't care about the American people. They only care about their corporate donations. That's why we had the worst COVID response in the world. It's why we're the only industrialized nation not to have some form of universal healthcare. It's why our life expectancy is on the decline, why rates of depression and suicide are on the rise, and why a full half of young Americans have lost faith in capitalism entirely. And if we're talking about Americans in Vietnam, Vietnam is constantly among the top foreign retirement destinations for Americans. So there is population exchange between Vietnam and the US. It's just not in the direction DeSantis would have you believe.
Now, as part of this bill, Florida will create a Portraits in Patriotism library so students can learn about real patriots who came to this country after seeing the horrors of these.
Dude, this is the fucking brain rot irony, okay, of people who say like, dude, Cuba is such an authoritarian state. It's like literally fucking, it's crazy. Like they're brainwashing their children, and then like we have this here in America, okay? Oh, there's no freedom of speech in Cuba, and then like in America, if you left it up to the Republicans, like we would have no freedom of speech either, okay? Like you think pro-Southern, pro-Confederacy education in the South is not directly a consequence of like propagandizing and trying to create a more favorable position and change history and continue to brainwash millions of Americans?
Communist regimes. We actually have folks here today. You'll hear from her in a minute. Anna Abauza. She came to the United States when she was a teenager, fleeing from Nicaragua when the Sandinistas brought socialism to that country.
Another part of the bill is the creation of what Florida is calling the Portraits in Patriotism library, where students can learn about people who are willing to be useful pawns to the political right and condemn left-wing politics, including one person who fled from Nicaragua when, quote, the Sandinistas brought socialism to that country. If Ron DeSantis weren't perhaps the dumbest politician currently living, I would assume this was satire. The years he's referring to are widely known as the period during which the United States funded right-wing death squads in Nicaragua and El Salvador. And it wasn't just indirect funding. The CIA also played an active and criminal role in what were called the Dirty Wars.
Yeah, and all of that is like literally, okay, I hope they don't show anything like...
For example, they planted mines around 3 Nicaraguan harbors, which constituted an act of state terrorism.
While the mining of Nicaraguan harbors has caused a huge political furor in the United States, anti-Sandinista guerrilla sources here in Costa Rica feel vindicated because of the tactical effectiveness of the mining. Specifically, the denial of these high-speed patrol boats and landing craft to the communist government in Nicaragua.
Thankfully, the US was convicted of violating international law at the World Court. So, when DeSantis talks about people fleeing Nicaragua when socialism came to the country, what he's leaving out is that socialism was on track to improve people's lives and counter the lie of capitalist superiority. So the United States decided to intervene and plunge the country into chaos through unspeakable violence and violations of international law. None of this is secret knowledge.
I mean, like, yeah, that's the worst part, is that this shit's not even kept hidden at this point. Like, everyone has the access to know this. But then you see the death squads and descendants of people who actually worked in and engaged in this brutality live in America and become actual prominent political figures here, and no one knows about it, so it doesn't matter.
You can go online right now and read about Reagan's meddling in the Global South. As always, I've left some links in the description.
Finally, I'm signing House Bill 233. The bill requires colleges and universities to conduct annual assessments on the intellectual freedom and viewpoint diversity at these institutions. It used to be thought that a university campus was
Actual misleading and propaganda. The world looks so good from your high chair, my man. Wait, what are you trying to say here? Am I wrong? What part of this video is wrong from my high horse?
a place where you'd be exposed to a lot of different ideas. Unfortunately, now the norm is really these are more intellectually repressive environments. You have orthodoxies that are promoted and other viewpoints are shunned or even suppressed. We don't want that in Florida. You need to have a true contest of ideas. Students should not be shielded from ideas, and we want robust First Amendment speech.
I love that, which is why we're fucking banning, which is why we're just only going to let you learn about our understanding of the world in the free market of ideas. Like, this is literally a celebration / announcement of, I guess, what they consider to be CRT, but for, you know, fascism and reactionary worldviews
On our college and university campuses. And I think that having intellectual diversity is something that's very, very important.
Okay, House Bill 233, quote, requires public colleges and universities to conduct annual assessments on the intellectual freedom and viewpoint diversity at these institutions. Ron DeSantis is all about intellectual freedom, college kids having the chance to learn dissenting opinions, and freedom of speech on campus.
I mean, the guy that facilitated the Iran-Contra deal was promoted, instead of going to jail, was promoted to become the president of the NRA, like, under Donald Trump. So he did have a short-lived reign there, but I don't know how else to describe this to you. That, like, the same fucking violent paramilitary death squads that murdered entire villages, put fucking mines everywhere, engaged in terror, like, their descendants live in America. One of them is prominent media figure, Republican strategist, Ana Navarro. It's like, it's the same energy as what's his face, Sebastian Gorka, rolling around with a Vitesse Rend thing on his, a pin from the Vitesse Rend on his chest.
Except, you know, when he's actively trying to ban things like critical race theory, which isn't even taught in Florida.
Ana Navarro is a Democrat? So Ana Navarro was never a Republican. Is that what you're saying to me? Why are people in my chat so fucking... First of all, Democrat does not mean good. Secondly, why are people in my chat so confidently wrong all the fucking time? Like, here, dude. Here. Okay, here you go. Navarro was born in 1971 to a wealthy landowning family in Nicaragua. She's the daughter of Violeta Flores Lopez and Jose Augusto Navarro Flores. She and her family moved to the United States in 1980 because of the political turmoil. Though her father stayed behind to continue to fight with the Contras against the Sandinista government. She later said that then U.S. President Ronald Reagan's support of the Contras made her a lifelong Republican. Navarro has served in a number of Republican administrations, including the transition team for Florida Governor Jeb Bush in 1998. Political party affiliation, Republican. Bro, come on, bro.
Or an accurate history of the slave trade. Topics which don't comply with his vision of a staunchly right-wing education. Let's get one thing straight. Reactionaries like DeSantis and their wealthy suburban supporters.
Like, why don't people just Google shit before they come in to be like, Ana Navarro, you mean the Democrat? Okay. There are plenty of dipshit Democrats with horrible dog shit American imperialist points of view. I talk about it all the time. As a matter of fact, it's one thing that I consistently talk about. When it comes to American imperialism and American exceptionalism, America is a one-party government. It is functionally a one-party government. There are very few people in the American government, whether they are Democrat or Republican, that speak out against American involvement, American imperialism, no matter how destructive or deadly our actions may be. Okay, to my friends in New York, I still have some connections with old Contra leaders, ... if needed. I remember her tweeting that.
Seem to believe that all colleges and universities are anti-capitalist indoctrination centers. To put it as gently as I possibly can, that is among the dumbest things I have ever heard. To my knowledge, there is not a single school in this country that doesn't allow college Republican groups or college Democrat groups. Both the Republicans and the Democrats are capitalist parties. Even the most supposedly left-wing candidates like Elizabeth Warren go out of their way to remind people that they're capitalists. You know what's often not allowed on college campuses? Socialist groups. The ideology DeSantis claims is brainwashing all our students. They're often seen as extremists, and faculty don't want to risk their jobs by associating with actual left-wing ideas. For those of you who have attended college, leave in the comments if you ever met an even remotely socialist professor. I will be very surprised. In my experience, and the experience of everyone I've spoken to, capitalist economics and ideas are the norm on college campuses.
Are you a student or a teacher? Well,
some schools do allow DSA chapters, for the record, but the most banned student associations are still BDS, for example, like pro-Palestine student associations. Absolutely fucking eviscerated in every fucking school.
write to your congressman for a copy of J. Edgar
Did you meet one? No, I had zero Marxist professors, like zero. Zero, zero, zero.
Hoover's report, Communist Target Youth. See how, on direct orders from Moscow, the party is in a drive to get communist speakers into our colleges and universities, taking advantage of American academic freedom and the students' naturally inquiring minds. Their aim is to preach revolutionary tactics and change peaceful campuses into scenes like this. The communist-incited student riots in San Francisco.
The assertion that communists are brainwashing the country's college students isn't new. It's a page ripped directly from McCarthyism, and we need to understand it as such. It is part of the new Red Scare.
And we thought, what if we could do that same thing for people who fled to America, who had all the places in the world to choose to come, but they chose to come here to the United States because where they were from, freedom was a luxury and liberty was just a dream. What if we could interview those people and have young folks like those?
Yeah, there's definitely not a lot of defector interviews in the media, dude.
That are here today, ask them questions and hear back about what it really means to live in a communist regime like that in Cuba, or to other totalitarian regimes like in Nicaragua or Venezuela. And that's what today is all about. And myself and Representative Zika, the members that are here today, gathered with the victims of communism months ago on the steps of the Capitol to make sure that we would achieve just that.
Want to know a fun fact about the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation? They count people who died from COVID and literal...
And also Nazis, like literal Nazis, actual Nazis, dude.
Nazi soldiers from World War II as victims of communism.
I love that, dude. It's one of the funniest fucking things ever. I swear to God. Like, oh yeah, look at these horrible victims of communism. Man, communism's so bad. Look at all these fucking Nazis that died under communism.
I mean, yeah, technically it was the Soviets who beat the Nazis, which is an odd thing for the Foundation to admit, because people like DeSantis and other American politicians love to claim it was the US that beat them. As far as COVID deaths go, the hyper-capitalist US has had the most deaths by far, and social...
Okay, we're done with this. I'm just having Noah on, okay? We're having Noah on. Fuck it. It's Noah time. It's Noah call-in time. I'll finish the rest of this video in a little bit because, it's time to bring on a guest, friend of the show,